So an action plan, things that you should actually go out and try to do. As all of you here already appreciate the power and interest of patterns, that's probably why you're here. But you need to convey your passion to your organization. Everybody in your organization must share the same kind of passion. Passion will grow and one, but it needs to at least have some basis of it. You should have within your organizations a pattern study group. This could be an informal kind of a notion, but the idea is day one, to find a group of fellow travelers, people who think and share the same kind of interest that you do in the patterns community, and organize them. Get them to start talking, get them to start doing draft patterns, get them to start doing little informal writers' workshops, whatever it takes to start building this kind of a community. As that community coalesces, individuals within that community will self-organize themselves and will come forward as the most obvious candidates for things like the patterns librarian kind of a position, or the facilitator of writers' workshops. And at that point in time, that's when management should make those positions or that kind of a status official. And what I am saying here, what we are saying here very specifically is don't go out and try to hire somebody day one to be a patterns librarian and have them come in and try to impose patterns on the organization. It won't work. Create your community and let the leaders emerge from that community and then give them their official status. That's probably a pattern. It is very helpful to have a kind of visual model, or at least a shared mental model of your organization as the foundation for where you're going to build your index into the patterns library. This was something that was advocated a long time ago for objects, and very few people ever did, but it has some very significant advantages for you. Then start building your patterns library by acquiring judiciously patterns from the community that you think are most appropriate and more useful. Capture your own. Keep your visual index updated constantly as you go. And this, the sharing policy. This is an important one too. When people talk about knowledge management, they have this tendency to be very insular, very proprietary. They are looking at what they perceive to be a corporate asset, and they want to protect that asset and grow that asset, but keep it within the boundaries and the foundations of the corporate entity. I would suggest that, just as has been the case in software, this is not necessarily the best model. An open source view of patterns is probably far more productive and will lead to a much greater strategic advantage, because you will find your strategic advantage not in holding close a set of patterns that only you can have, but in finding all of the thread within all of these patterns, that specific thread that is going to help you and your organization best achieve its goals. So this kind of inclusive pattern sharing policy, I think, is an important consequence. And then you need to start infusing this throughout the rest of the operations of your organization. So when you have a new hire, a new person coming into your organization, part of their training manual, part of the process of bringing them into the organization is infusing them with this interest and knowledge and passion for patterns. So all of these, this is not a short, this is probably a relatively long-term kind of a process. It might take you a year to fully and firmly establish your patterns organization. It might take a couple of years. But it's not a quick fix kind of thing, but it is a powerful kind of a foundation. That is where I'm going to stop. We have one more slide, which I am going to mandate that my colleague comes up and talks to you about.
No, please.
Okay. There is a video. This is a link to the video. Were they going to have it available here, or is this just for people to find on their own?
I don't know, if we have time, if there is a slot, we can look at it together maybe. I really recommend this film. It was shown at the BBC. And it's really, well, continue. The film about the relationship between order and chaos. And
so I have seen this film myself. I agree that it is a very valuable and interesting film. I think it will capture your imaginations. It's relevant to you as a patterns community because it is suggesting ways of doing a disciplined kind of pattern mining, looking at what appears to be chaos, what appears to be a very complicated, complex, highly dynamic kind of a situation, and seeing how order emerges from that. Well, pattern is a kind of an order. And so it is not directly about patterns, but it supports the philosophy of what you are trying to do with patterns. It suggests a number of different kinds of avenues in which you might explore the use of patterns or the discovery of patterns. The notion of self-similarity or self-likeness that Mandelbrot with fractals that you have seen is an example of the kind of order that comes out of this. It suggests that maybe there might be similar kinds of relationships among patterns, that our pattern language, just like our natural languages, oftentimes have different kinds of levels of explicitness, and we can find self-similarity across those. So it's a well-done film. And with that, questions?
I have a bunch of aha experience, and I got yes. In Japanese, but gatten is a candidate.
What are you thinking of?
But anyway, and I report you on the Twitter. The Japanese user talk about very positive nuance about your presentation, and I feel I say always I have a very bunch of elements. Anyway, and how about question or Q&A? You have any questions?
You mentioned data, information, and knowledge. What is, in your opinion, the relationship between data, information, and knowledge? What is data? What is information?
So the kind of classic definition is that data is just a fact. So 15 is data. But you put facts together in a context. You put different kinds of facts together and you create information. So if you have even a fact like age and a number like 15, the two of them together becomes information. But the real definition of information is not just the combination or juxtaposition of data, of facts, but it is also that information put together in the right form, at the right time, for the right person. So if you are an auditor and you have all of this data that's put together in a stack of paper, just columns and columns of numbers in a stack of paper this high, that's not yet information, because it's not in a form that you can actually use it in order to determine whether something has gone wrong with the finances of that organization. You need to translate that data into a particular form, say a standardized report format or structure that companies have to do at the end of the year. So when it's in that form, and when it's given to you, the auditor, the right person, then it has the potential to be information. Time is still a factor, because if I give you my audit report 10 years from now, and the company failed in the meantime, it wasn't useful. So it has to be, at the right time as well. Knowledge is when you take information. So, and combine it with experience. So again, if I'm an auditor of a company, or I'm an auditor, I work for a big CPA firm. I've probably seen several hundred audit reports. And because of my experience with all these different audit reports, a new one comes across my desk, I can look at it and I can almost instantly say, oh, there's a problem here, there's a problem here, this is where I need to investigate further. I don't need to look at this because it is okay. This is kind of intuitive sense, this is tacit knowledge that you have based upon your experience of encountering the same kind of information over and over. So that's the way that I would relate the three together, and that's a fairly classical kind of definition. Does that address your, okay?
The slide on action plan, are there any companies that have adopted that and figured from it?
I wanted to get some examples of exactly that. I know of only one company, and I don't know details, but Siemens in Germany is doing something very similar to this. And I have heard of others, but I wasn't able to, successfully complete the research to actually give you 3 or 4 different examples. But I know Siemens is, and I know that others are saying that they are.
So they have a Siemens library and all that.
Yes.
Anyone other question?
You implied in talking about the libraries of patterns that some patterns are unique to a company, even using proprietary information and very specialized. I think in general a pattern should be something generic that applies to a large number of situations because it only applies to your particular problem. It's a solution, but it's not a pattern.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's, I believe that there's a continuum in that notion. So when Toyota, as a manufacturing company, started looking at what they were doing, and they started documenting things about what they were doing, it started off as just solutions. Here's how Toyota is going to solve this problem in Toyota or even in this particular factory. They then probably evolved to the point of actually being patterns. This is the way that Toyota does things wherever and whatever. So they're now a pattern, but they are still very much based upon a specific company and a specific individual. And at that point in time, a company might think that they're proprietary and might want to keep them, private. I don't think they're right, but they might want to. But eventually, they evolve still further. They start to say, oh, well, here's something that applies to all of manufacturing. And now it's a pattern, it's the Toyota way. And the Toyota way should be shared and was shared. So there's a continuum of evolution of how people regard this knowledge and the patterns that result from it. But I'm totally in agreement that I think it is best to throw it out there immediately, make everything public, right from day one. Yeah, it will help you accelerate your evolution, your process.
In your action plan, you suggest the word mandala and visualize your
Yes.
mental model. And do you have any concrete suggestions to use mandala?
Yes. I can't remember if it's in here.
No.
It's not, they didn't make it into this.
No.
Okay. When we've been talking about our particular pattern language we're trying to deal with, we're coming up with a lot of patterns. And I've actually presented this idea at other patterns conferences in the past. On my desk, above my desk, I have a Wheel of Life Thangka painting. So it's a Tibetan Buddhist painting on cloth. And the Wheel of Life is a particular form of mandala. In the center it has 3 symbols that represent the fundamental forces of the universe. Then it has a little circle that talks about the evolution of life, and then it has segments that contain little icons and pictures. And then it has another circle, and then it has deities on the outside. So this is I have used this in systems architecture classes when I've been teaching people how to do an architecture for their organization. And I find it useful here. It's a really great way of organizing a huge body of information in a very small space. So that one Wheel of Life Tonka painting in my office depicts essentially everything you would have learned, growing up as a Tibetan Buddhist about the universe and the world and the different deities and all the right ways of living. I mean, it's an immense amount of information. And it works because it's evocative. It doesn't try to represent literally the world. But each of these icons will bring back a story that you heard when you were a child or when you went to the seminary or whatever. And so that's the power. So it gives you a very compact way of representing huge amounts of information. And that's what I thought, a kanji might be able to do the
Right.
same thing.
Will you show me the sample later, or?
Yes, I have it on my computer. I can show you a picture of it. Okay.
You mentioned about the process of pattern life cycle, such as study group and mining patterns. And I'm interested about how to maintain this pattern, because I observed several situations where firstly many of patterns have been mined and stored in the repository, but after that people don't have about
Yes.
So how to revise and reorganize this pattern.
Yes.
Do you have any suggestion?
I think this is a problem that frustrated Christopher Alexander, because as soon as he published his pattern book, it kind of became, oh, this is it. It's written in concrete, it's written on paper, but it's in black and white, and this is the pattern language. And it shouldn't be. It was not for him. For him, this was an articulation. These are the patterns that I think I see and my team sees today. But these patterns are not, particularly the ones that had a low confidence level. The idea was that these things should evolve. And we should be out looking for and confirming or denying these things, which is maintenance. And to my knowledge, nobody has ever followed that concern. But I believe with you that this is a very real issue. And it is something in terms of the process. If you are doing things, if you have an institution, you've got a librarian, you've got a writing group that meets regularly, you should be, every once in a while, you should take patterns out of the library and run them through the process again. That nothing should stay permanently fixed. So, that's the only way I would see the solution, is just systematically taking your library and put it through the process again. But I don't know of anybody that's doing that. Yes.
Thank you for great presentation. You said taxi information.
Mm-hmm.
You said about taxi information. I guess the store taxi narration, taxi information, and the story. You said structured story about structured story. We always use the explicit information as without tacit information. The form of, we use the form of use case or user stories. They are just explicit information in the characters.
Mm-hmm.
We should imagine the tacit information.
Yes.
But we always mistake take the,
Mhm.
the imagination. So how can we face the difficulty of the imagination?
Okay. I'll just use one example. So you mentioned a user story. Okay. A user story was intended when the concept of a user story was first presented. The idea was this is some text that is a reminder of a conversation that we must have and a memory of a conversation that we have had. So it is not supposed to be explicit. It is supposed to be an explicit capturing of a bit of tacit knowledge that here is something we need to think about. So if you can perpetuate that note, you just keep that simple thing in mind, that recognize that this is not a thing. This is a reminder of something that needs to be done. That helps keep the discipline. You recognize that this is a explicit capturing of a whole bunch of tacit information. And at one point in time, it's information we don't have yet because we haven't had the conversation. As soon as we have the conversation, then we have shared the tacit information, and now the card is just a reminder. It's a trigger. It brings us back. And we can do that with everything. The problem, particularly in the discipline of software, is the fact that we try to make things something that they are not. So we've tried to turn the user story into explicit knowledge about a requirement. And so this is a mistake, but it requires just discipline to constantly remind yourself, no, wait, this is not what it appears to be. This is supposed to be this. And that's a habit. So you are constantly reflective on what it is you're doing, and when you see yourself trying to make the tacit too explicit, too fast, stop. Don't do that. But it's a discipline that has to be developed.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to kind of comment on was the use of the pictorial type representations, like with what you were saying, like what you have over your office, over your desk, which are very useful things. But one thing I've noticed too is they convey different meanings to different people. So if I look at the image over your desk, it will definitely bring a certain form of feeling or expression or whatever. And I think this is one of the things I've noticed with patterns too. Those are very useful things, but they generally, in pattern writing, don't seem to stand on their own. They can be useful, but if I'm a pattern author and I'm putting that out there, to me it's important to have descriptions of what meaning I am meaning behind that picture. I always get the saying that I've always, in the U.S. anyway, I know we have a saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, for example. And I say, well, 1,000 words is it worth? What are your words behind the picture? And so for me, I always say that that's important to clarify, especially if you're using this type of imagery, which I find very useful. I think it's very important. Even like at the beginning of like with Alexander, like to use pictures a lot, and there you can see the pictures of the types of buildings or things that he was saying. Me and Foot tried to do that with some of the patterns that we did Alexander style. We used pictures a lot, but some of the descriptions were meant to support that. So,
right. So I didn't explicitly talk about the pictures within patterns.
yes,
Those are definitely useful.
yes.
The mandala is intended to be nothing more than an index. So,
Okay.
so what I want to, I walk into, I walk into my Tibetan philosophy class, and I see this thing up here on the wall, and it means nothing to me. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of pretty pictures, little icons and weird figures and things. I mean, it means absolutely nothing. But then as I start to learn these things, I said, oh, this means something. But then I can look at that index and I say, oh, because this is here, and these other things are here, maybe I should learn some more about these. And so it's just, and then eventually, of course, if I had been raised as a Tibetan, I would have, recognized all of these things, that everything would have had meaning to me. And then the location and things of the organization provides additional meta context.
I guess I'm just wondering if the meaning can vary, like you have meaning
Yeah.
to you, but then another individual, it'll have meaning to them, but that, the meaning between those two, there can be some variation between that, because it'll have similar, but based upon their own experiences, that there's gonna be a little bit different.
Sure.
Possibly.
Yeah, there clearly are grounds for interpretation. But that's, so as an index, your mother told you one story, my mother told me the same story, but with different nuances.
With her biases or her feelings or whatever.
And so we can look at the same icon and we can see different things.
Exactly.
As an index, that's
Yeah.
definitely true.
Yeah.
And the same thing with a pattern. We can look at a pattern and we can see different things. But that's the power. You have to retain ambiguity or you have no grounds for innovation.
But I think also the important thing, and the point I was trying to make is with a pattern, because if you have those kind of ambiguities, if you really want to communicate that tacit knowledge, adding some of that extra
Yes.
details of what your experience and what your observations with all of that form you had, I think was very important.
The richer the
As you said,
context, the
yes.
richer the connections, the better the pattern.
Yes.
Definitely.